So today I'm doing brisket, but the video is not going to be about the brisket. This is more going to be about the grill. I recently picked up a Masterbuilt 1150 Gravity Series charcoal smoker. I did a review video of that. If you're interested, I'll put a link at the end of the video. But I had a comment on the video where the person had mentioned that they use full splits of wood in the Gravity Series charcoal smoker. Now, Masterbuilt does not say that you can do this. So if you want to try this, do it at your own risk. But I gave it a try. Really like the results. Get very good smoky wood flavor. I needed to give this a test on a brisket because I want to see if this brisket will come out just as good as when I cook it on my traditional offset smoker where I'm just using strictly splits of wood. So that's what we're doing today. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. All right, here is our brisket. This is a Costco prime grade brisket. Definitely one of the best briskets you will be able to find easily accessible if you have a Costco near you. It's prime grade. The price is usually pretty decent. I think this was maybe $4.50 a pound. For prime, not that bad. I'm not really gonna go too in detailed about the trimming because this isn't really a brisket how-to video. I will show you a few things I like to do. So the most important thing about trimming brisket is when you're at the supermarket looking for the brisket, you need to pick yourself out a proper sized brisket. Get one that's got an even, uniform shape. You don't want the flat to be too thin. You can see how thin it is here. This is actually one of the better ones that was there. But for the most part, this flat is pretty thick, and you can see how the point's always going to be higher, but you can see how the point's not too much higher than this. Sometimes you'll have a giant point, single sweep down, you'll have a real thin flat. You're going to have issues cooking when it's that discrepancy between the flat and the point, and your flat's going to dry out or your point's going to be undercooked. So with something thin like this is going to come off. So I'll just start there. That's going to be too thin. So I'm just going to cut it off. And I don't mind cutting off good chunks of meat off this brisket to get a nice uniformed shape because I have a meat grinder. Save that. It's going to make some delicious burgers. I've seen a lot of comments out there about trimming brisket where people say, don't trim anything, leave it like that. Listen, if that's what you want to do, totally fine. I'm telling you what I like to do, what I've had success with, and that's getting this brisket shaped down to a nice even shape. This way your final product, every slice is going to be delicious. You might have one end on the flat that's a little dry, but other than that, all the slices from front to back are going to be super delicious. Whereas if you don't trim, you're going to have giant pockets of fat in some of your pieces. Most people are going to end up cutting that out anyway. I mean, I love the brisket fat, so I wouldn't cut it out. I'd probably eat it, but it gets a little rich. But either way, this method that I like to use is a nice clean method. You get good quality final product, and the most important thing is cooking it is so much easier. It cooks evenly. You run into less issues with pieces drying out or being undercooked. And there's some huge fat layers on this one, so if you just leave it, it's going to take a while to render this fat down. You want that, like you've probably seen, that 1/4 inch layer of fat on the top here. And again, I have a meat grinder, so I am totally cool with cutting off extra chunks of meat because I save this up, grind it up, and ground up brisket makes some of the best burgers you'll ever have. So if you have a meat grinder, don't be afraid to just chop this thing up and get it down to a nice size, especially if you're cooking on a smaller grill. With my traditional offset, size doesn't matter because of how big it is, but this one, I might need to trim it down a little bit to make sure it fits on the grate. But that's just my little trimming rant because I see it all the time online. People just say, don't trim, do this, do that. Do what works for you, and I'm telling you what works for me. Making a simple, easy cooking process for me that has good quality results at the end. So whatever works for you, do what you're gonna do. Now, show you a few other things I like to do here before I go ahead and just trim this. This one looks pretty good here. It's actually one of the nicer briskets I've gotten, but there's a good chunk of fat up here. I like to just slowly take piece by piece off. And the fat, again, I run through the grinder and I end up making tallow with. So I just kind of trim the edge of the fat down. This will show me how much fat layer I have I'm not worried about this because, again, I come in and just square a little chunk off the side to get all that brown meat off. But usually here, call it the decal sometimes, there's a big chunk of fat right there where you saw me turn my knife. You can see this is all fat. So this is the decal. Right after the decal, there's a nice chunk of fat here, so you're gonna have to work the fat off there for sure. So I just wanna go ahead and show you that. Then on the bottom side, you're gonna wanna work this fat out. This is another huge pocket of fat. You're gonna get a bunch out of here. You could scoop out some of it. It will go far underneath this piece because you have your flat that comes here, and then the point is here, and the point goes on top of the flat on this section. So if you keep working that fat out underneath here, you're just going to separate the point and the fat. You're just going to separate the point and the flat. So you got to find a point where you cut here and you stop and you just leave the fat in there. So on this one, I'm probably going to cut right about here, scoop all this fat out as much as I can, maybe leave like a 1/4 inch or so. But this is just a huge chunk of fat. You're going to want to remove that. That's going to be tough to render down. And once you get all that fat figured out, go ahead and we'll round this out. Like you'll see this part over here. Let me turn it for you so you can see. You'll see how I cut this thin part off. It kind of just has this drop off. This is going to be rounded out. So I want a nice uniform shape. All right, there's the brisket now. I'm gonna get this trimmed up and then I will be back to show you the end result. And there it is, all trimmed up. Not too bad. This was definitely one of the nicer briskets I have gotten. You can see this nice shape that we have. Like I said, this is what I was talking about. Nice and uniform. And you can see the thickness of the flat. Let's get it in focus. See the thickness of the flat over here is not too much different from the thickness of the point. And here you can see that pocket of fat I was talking about. So I trimmed this down to maybe a little over a 1/4 inch. But you can go ahead, you can keep taking that out. And like I said, you got to be careful because you're going to get under the flat there. But feel free to take out as much of this as you want. With the grill I'm using today, I wanted to keep a little more extra fat on there because with the offset smoker I get tons of airflow. I can run it at a hotter temp, whereas airflow on this isn't going to be that great, so I want to make sure I have some good protection of fat. You can see actually here on this section there wasn't much of a fat layer here. It was kind of just like a silver skin, and you can see some of the meat poking through. That was an error on my part, so won't be a big deal. But this brisket is looking very good, and it's still super cold. It was kind of semi-frozen, which makes it easier to trim. So I'm gonna let this sit out a little bit after we get it seasoned and start up that grill, so it should thaw out a good amount. But let's go ahead and get this seasoned, and we're going to start with the backside. And you can also see I took off all the fat here on the bottom of the flat. So we're going to start off with a little kosher salt. I didn't mention the weight on this. I believe it was maybe 16, no, it was probably 16, it's probably 14-pound brisket. I always like to go with a smaller brisket when I'm cooking. It's just a quicker cook. It's a lot easier to manage. All right, now black pepper. This is coarse black pepper. And I always go pretty heavy with the black pepper. All right, then we finish it off with garlic powder. All right, if you have an SPG blend, you could just go ahead and throw that on there. You could even use a barbecue seasoning. You could just do the salt and pepper that a lot of people like to do with brisket. I like salt, pepper, garlic. I think it's a good combo. And I've seen a lot of myths out there of all sorts of things when it comes to briskets, but kind of like when garlic powder is such a fine powder, it's gonna clog up the meat. You're not gonna get any smoke flavor. That's hogwash. Because think about ribs. When you cook ribs, Most of the times people are putting a lot of different seasonings on there. Paprika is one of them, which is one of the finest seasonings you can have. And I'll tell you, my ribs get plenty of smoke flavor on them when I'm cooking them. So I don't think that is the case. But you do what you want. Brisket's good with just salt and pepper. That's always a good option. But I like that garlic powder. So that's an extra element to it. Man, this looks good. I haven't done a brisket in a long time, so I'm excited about this. And with the few cooks I've done using that method on the Masterbuilt where you put full splits in there, I think this is going to come out good. And if it does, it's going to be a game changer because it's a set it and forget it type of smoker. I mean, you do have to watch that charcoal basket. Make sure you don't lose all your charcoal out of there. But other than that, you can monitor on your phone. But we'll go over all that when we start cooking. Let's get this garlic powder on here. And I don't use a lot of garlic powder. I just add a nice little layer. Like I said, like the added flavor of the garlic on there. That's what I do with my steaks, salt, pepper, garlic. Most beef, this is how I'm going to cook it. So I'm not going to change it for a brisket. But I've used my barbecue rub on the brisket before. It comes out good as well. So honestly, you can't go wrong with seasoning. Pick what you like. If you're that Texas style brisket man, do the salt and pepper. You know, the Aaron Franklin salt and pepper mix. And you could mix all this up together. But with brisket, I really like to do it one by one so I get the exact amount of each seasoning on there that I want and the correct amount of salt and pepper. But there's that. Let's go out. I'm going to fire up this Masterbuilt and I'll show you how I'm going to set it up with the full splits in there. So we'll just let this chill in here, let that salt pull some of the moisture out, let this thaw out a little bit because like I said, it was kind of frozen in there. But let's go out and get this Masterbuilt set up. All right, here we are at the Masterbuilt. This is what I'm talking about. We're going to throw these splits in there. I've got a few of them, but we're also going to be using some charcoal. Let me show you. All right, so if you're not used to the Masterbuilt, it's got this big hopper on the side and you're supposed to fill it with charcoal and a couple wood chunks. I don't know if you can see down in there. Might be a little too dark in there. But either way, so down there right now, I have a bunch of charcoal that's sitting in the bottom because I had previously cooked with it. There's probably a chunk of wood in there from the last one I did. So I'm going to take this split of wood here. Oh, it's hard to see. Try to come around the other way. I'm going to take this whole split of wood, just stick it down there on top of the charcoal. Again, Masterbuilt does not recommend this. Now I'm going to go ahead and stick another split down in there, kind of, just like that. Now you still need the charcoal in there to kind of keep everything burning. So there's a layer of charcoal on the bottom. That's going to start lighting, and it's going to light up these pieces of wood. So I'm just going to dump some charcoal. So I just dumped a little charcoal around the wood so it'll kind of keep it burning. You can't just use straight wood in there. I don't think you can, at least. Doesn't seem like it would work. And I got these fire starters. And with these fire starters, I like to break them up, kind of loosen it. It makes them a lot easier to light and stay lit. We'll just go ahead and light those up. Close this. Close that. All right, so now we're just gonna let this light, get that charcoal going. I'm gonna give it about 5-10 minutes, then come out here, turn this fan on, get it going. We'll set it up to temp. I'm gonna set it to 225 initially, and you can see this nice big grill grate. If you can see in here, it's a little dark. There's a nice big grill grate here, so we won't have to put it on the bottom. So it's going to keep that brisket up away from that heat level here. And there's probably, you can put another grate up top. You can see this one back here goes up top, but I think with the lid closed, there wouldn't be enough room to put it up there. So right here is going to be good. Got plenty of room to throw the brisket there. So I'm going to let this go, warm this up. Once it's up to 225, I'll see you back out here to throw the brisket on. All right, we are up to temp on the Masterbuilt 225, like I said. Now, I've got this ambient meat probe, this ambient temp probe over here, hooked up to my ThermoWorks RFX, because I want to back up for the app on here in case I have an issue. So, I'm gonna get this brisket. Now, direction doesn't matter here, just because there's no airflow really. Set it down right there. All the heat's coming from the bottom. So on a pellet grill, sometimes I'll do fat side down, but I'm gonna leave it like this. I'm gonna see how it cooks. I may need to flip it over, but we'll see how it goes. So I've got the temperature probe for the Masterbuilt here. Get that in, and yeah, this thing's still a little frozen, so it's gonna throw our cooking times off a little bit. And I have my RFX probe, like I said, as a backup. What I didn't do was hit hold. So there's a button over here on the controller, the power button. If you just tap it once, it goes into hold. So when you open it up, the fan shuts off so it doesn't get out of control, whereas I could feel the heat was starting to pick up there. So I'm gonna let this heat dissipate for a little bit, and then I'll close it up. I don't want it to run too hot early. We want to keep this nice and low to start off with. Like I said, I got it at 225. Might even kick it down a little bit. Looks like some of that heat has dissipated, so let's close this up, turn it back on, and let this thing cook. All right, so we got the brisket on the Masterbuilt. Now, the Masterbuilt's been pretty good. I've enjoyed using it, but doing this method, I've really started liking it a lot more. Now, few problems I have had with it. First, recently tried turning it on, it wouldn't turn on for me. So did some diagnosing, and I found their little power cord adapter, the piece that actually plugs into the electrical socket. It's a little square. What it is a converter. It takes 120 volts AC and it's converting it to 12 volts, I believe, DC. So I tested it there. I was getting no voltage coming out of the converter. This could be my fault because I usually leave it on top of the grill and it tends to fall down. So that may have been what happened, but I ordered a new part, put it in, no issues at all. Now you also need to be very careful. Well, first off, like I've been saying, this method is not recommended by Masterbuilt. So do this at your own risk. There could be issues that come along with this, but I've done it a couple times. I've enjoyed it, no problems for low and slow cooking. But again, they mention you can use wood chunks mixed with charcoal. Don't use all wood chunks. They don't mention anything about using splits of wood, so take that as you may. Now, the issues I've had with this grill is I've had some serious flare-ups, and it comes when I'm doing a low and slow cook followed by a fast and hot cook. But you still need to be careful if you've done a bunch of slow cooks on it and then you want to go ahead and ramp it up and do a quick cook. You might have some drippings in there that cause a flare-up. So let me explain what has happened to me. I've done ribs, low and slow, cook them, let them finish. Then after that, I went to do chicken wings, and I do chicken wings at about 425 degrees. So when I cranked it up to 425, within 10 or 15 minutes, I had a serious flare up on this grill. I got it under control, caught it before it ruined the wings. So got to be careful with these though. For whatever reason, they hold a lot of grease and the heat in there will cause a grease fire. Now the second time was with jalapeno poppers, bacon wrapped jalapeno poppers, which I love to do. And I have a video on those and you can see the method. What I like to do is slow cook them around 225. Let that bacon render down nicely, get some nice smoke flavor on there. After that bacon fat renders for a little bit, right at the end, I crank it up to about 375, 400, crisp that bacon up for about 15 minutes. So you can see where the issue was. All that bacon fat dripped down. Once I went to go crank it up, immediately had a grease fire. I did not catch it in time, and I went out in 15 minutes or so. The grill was shut off. Had an error code, I'm assuming for a high temperature. So I opened the grill up and there were my blackened jalapeno poppers that were inedible. So just want to throw that out there real quick about the issues I've had. But all in all, this is a really, really good grill, especially for low and slow. You get nice, great charcoal flavor with the wood chunks in there. You get good flavor as well. But with this method I'm doing today, you get really, really good results out of this. And it's set it and forget it. Temperature swings are rare on this. It usually stays rock steady at wherever I set it. So that's why I wanted to try a brisket on this, because I've done a pellet cooker brisket. They're okay, nothing special. I really want to see if this will impart some great flavor, because the only true way I've gotten delicious brisket was off my offset smoker. Pellet cooker is okay, but the offset is really the best way to cook brisket for flavor wise. So I'm hoping this will work almost as good, because if it's close enough, it's worth it for the ease of this cook. But got to set at 225. I like to keep it nice and low in the beginning for the first couple hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours. After it's taken some heat and the temperature comes up, I like to bump that heat up. I might bump it up to 250 for another couple hours. And then towards the end, when that bark is starting to set, I'm gonna bump it up again, probably to 275, and finish it off there until I'm ready to wrap it up. Reason I like to do that is it adds nice smoke flavor, but if you've cooked a brisket a little too hot right off the bat, you've noticed that it kind of curls up at the edges, and I want to avoid that, because once it curls up, it starts pooling in there, so I'm really trying to avoid that. That's why I was even debating going less than 225 for a little bit, but we should be okay at 225. I'll check it in maybe an hour or so and see how it's looking. If I feel like it's too hot, I will bump it down. But that is the plan for this Masterbuilt brisket using this wood split technique. And I'm going to say it again, Masterbuilt does not recommend this, so do this at your own risk if you have one. But I will keep you updated. I'll bring you out there in a little bit when I check on it, especially if I'm going to change the heat. But for now, I'm going to leave it at 225 for a few hours, and I will see you when we go to check it and bump it up to its next hotter setting. So I'm gonna hang out for a few hours, but you don't have to. Let's jump out there and check on this brisket. All right, brisket's been on for 4 hours. It's been rocking 225. See, it's coming along really nicely. That's slow cook. We had no peeling. It's got the nice mahogany smoke color there. So I'm pretty happy with this. Let's see, internal temp. We're at 139, it says, for internal after 4 hours, so we got some time to go. At this point, I would be fine with cranking it up, so I'm going to turn it up to 250 for the next few hours. Probably leave it at 250 and let it finish off since we're already at 139. I'm going to try and get this up to around 180. Once the bark looks good, we'll take it off and get it wrapped. So I'm going to let this cook, and I will see you when we are ready to wrap. All right, so we are 8 hours in on the brisket. Look at that. This is coming along really nice. Really liking how this looks. We are at 170 degrees on this. We are just about ready to wrap. Bark's feeling pretty good. It needs to render down a little bit more. I'm gonna try and take this up to 180. We are at 250 for temperature. I may bump it up a hair. You know what, I'm gonna leave it at 250 for maybe another hour or so. Then we'll bring it in and get it wrapped. So I'll see you in about an hour. We'll pull this off and get it wrapped up. All right, it's been another 45 minutes since we last checked the brisket out there. So it's been a total of about 9 hours on this brisket. I'm super happy with how this is coming out. It looks really nice, smells amazing. So I'm super excited to finish this off and give it a taste test. But now we got to wrap it. So let's go ahead and I'm going to show you my method for wrapping that I really like. All right, so it's pretty simple. You're just going to need a piece of tin foil underneath a piece of butcher paper. Then we're going to go ahead and you want to put beef tallow down. Don't tell anybody, but this is actually lard. I ran out of my beef tallow, but I have plenty of lard that I had rendered down. So this will work. You can see it doesn't look much different than beef tallow, and we are just looking to add some extra moisture in there. So the tallow, lard should be fine, but go ahead and use beef tallow if you have it. If you don't, you can use lard. I know lard is probably more readily available, depending. And if you don't have either, you can get away with just using some butter. But tallow nowadays, I'm seeing it all over the place, so actually you should be able to get your hands on some beef tallow. If not, get on the old Amazon. Now I'm going to pull the temperature probe out of this brisket for now. I'll give you a look. It's got a nice crispy bark already. See how beautiful that is. Let's see how the underside looks. Okay, so this is what I was a little worried about. We got a little charring here. I don't think I had any flare-ups. It kind of looks like a flare-up char. But this is what I was kind of worried about here with that heat on the bottom, because you're not getting the airflow like on an offset. You're just getting this blast of heat here. But this is the fat that's really the crispy part, so that's not going to be a big deal. It's actually might be a little nice. And we're going to sit this down when we finish it off, so it's going to be sitting in all that fat, and it's going to soften up all this stuff here. This is also a little dried out, so a little concerned, but the wrap will do wonders on something you think is dry. That's my biggest complaint with pellet cookers and a cooker like this, is this bottom part always gets a lot of heat. That's why sometimes I like to go fat side down, but we were pretty far away from the heat, so I really want to give this a shot. And we'll find out once this is wrapped up how it actually came out. But we're gonna put that bottom side up for now. The rest of this looks really nice though, but it's just this one section here and over here. It kind of looks like it got a flare up. There might have been a small flare up, like I mentioned before, the Masterbuilt. It's kind of known for that with me. I've had some issues with it. So it might have had a very small flare up there at the end when I bumped the temperature up, and I didn't notice it because the heat didn't change that much. Because this really looks more like it got hit by some direct heat. We should be, because over here is fine, like I said, but it'll be fine. I'm not too concerned about it. So let's go ahead, wrap this up. We just want to try and get this as tight as possible. Probably got a little too much paper, but that'll be okay. All right, so nice and tight. Give it a try and keep all that paper tight when we flip it. There we go. See if we can get 2 more flips out of this. Really want this stuff tight there. And then 1 more flip to get the bottom side back down. So this is now the top of the brisket, how it was sitting. I'm gonna get my temperature probe back in there so we can monitor this. Then what the foil is for, I like to do a foil boat, but with paper wrap first. I found this is a really nice method for brisket. So I like how the paper allows the bark to get softer, but it also releases some of that steam, so you're not getting it way too soft and it's not steaming. But this is also allows you to cover up this point that dries out, so it'll hold in a lot more moisture here, get that nice and broken down, a little softer. And same thing with this under part. It took a little extra heat. So that's why I like this foil boat with the paper wrap. It's kind of the best of both worlds here. I like to kind of wrap the edges where it took some heat as well. The most important thing is this point here. You can cover that up with your foil. This will still breathe. All right, and this is where you can really bump your heat up depending, since that bottom side did overcook a little bit. I'm gonna do a lower temperature cook to really give this time to kind of soften all that up a little bit. So let it sit here in this lard. But on my offset, I wouldn't be afraid to bump it up to 300, 325, but again, you have that airflow. So for this, you may be able to do 300. I'm gonna keep it at 275 at the most. I'm gonna bring this up to around 195 to 200 degrees. That's just where I'm gonna start probing it and checking it. Once it's at the tenderness that I like, where it feels nice and tender all throughout. It's kind of a tough game to play because the point is gonna feel super tender and the flat might feel a little tight. The point's always gonna feel tender. It's a looser cut of meat and there's a ton of fat in there, so it might not be cooked fully through, but it'll still feel tender. So I like to go by the flat over there. So around that 195, 200 degree mark, I'm gonna start checking it. I probably won't end up pulling it till maybe 205. It really depends on the brisket. I pulled some at 195 and I pulled others over 205. The other thing is, after this is done, I'm gonna put it in my warming cabinet and I'm gonna let it set overnight in the warming cabinet at about 140 degrees. And I found when you do that, you can pull it a little early because it'll still not really cook, but it'll kind of break down a little bit more in that warming cabinet. So if you pull it early, it's not tender enough. After that long hot hold, it should be well and tender. So that's the plan. I'm gonna throw this back out there till it's ready to go, throw it in my warming cabinet, and then I will see you in the morning. We will slice this up and see if this method on the Masterbuilt turned out a flavor that you can get similar to an offset. So you don't have to wait. Let's jump ahead and see how this thing came out. All right, guys, so brisket is done. After I wrapped it up, took another 2.5 hours. I got it up to between 200, 205, depending on where I probed it. Felt really nice and tender, so I took it out, brought it down to about 160 degrees, and then I threw it in my warming cabinet at 145 overnight. So before I pull it out, I was mentioning that the charring on the bottom. So I went back in my RFX meat thermometer app from ThermoWorks, which is great. And I looked at the graph of ambient temperature readings, and there definitely was a flare up, because I noticed it jumped from 275 up to 400 in about a 10-minute span, and then dropped off immediately. So it wasn't a long flare up. I got lucky there. Really could have ruined the brisket. It definitely did some damage, as you saw the charring, but I don't think it was anything crazy. So like I mentioned earlier about the flare-up issue with the Masterbuilt, that's my biggest problem with these things, is there is a issue for whatever reason with massive flare-ups on this. So just be careful of that when you're going from a low temperature to a high temperature. Probably could have avoided it if I didn't try and bump that temperature there at the end, but not ideal. So we'll see how it came out, and if it didn't have a flare-up, this thing would have been perfect on the bottom. So up on that second level rack is great. You can run fat side on the top. But let's pull it out, see how this came out. I know it smells delicious. I'm hoping this foil boat paper wrap softened up the tough spots. Feels a little softer, we'll see. Let's get unwrapped. It's gonna be the real test. I'm gonna move this back to the tray, actually. Beautiful. Excited about this. All right, so you can see how nice this thing looks. Nice jiggle to it there. This is good looking brisket. Flavor is going to be where it's at. Let's check this bottom side out. So you can see the charring softened up quite a bit. I'm actually very pleased with that. So this section here got hit by the flare-up, as you can tell, because this is all nice and clean. If I didn't have that flare-up, it would look like this on the whole bottom, so that's kind of nice. And this is probably going to be a little dry, but I don't think it's going to be that bad. It might just be dry because it's a flat, but this looks pretty good. And who knows, maybe it'll add some nice flavor to that charred fat. But I'm excited about this. But the main thing with this is we're looking to see if this has that smoked offset flavor. So let's go ahead and cut this right down the middle like I usually do. Separate that point and flat. Flat feels maybe a little overcooked. Let's take a look. Nice and juicy. See, there's plenty of juice coming out there. Great smoke ring. Pretty happy. You can see this fat is rendered down nicely up here. Let's cut this point in half. Take a look at that. Not bad. Could have used a little more rendering in there, but I'm happy with that. Looks pretty nice in here. I don't like to squeeze it too much. I like to keep that juice in there, so that looks pretty good. So let me get a slice of the flat here. And then I'm gonna move this over. Actually, before I do that, I want to get slice of this end here to see what happened with that, because that was the flare up part. Pull a couple slices off there. Then I'll get this point piece out of the way. I'm going to cut a nice slice of the point here. Smells like good brisket. That was a bad cut, but whatever. All right, so take a look at this flat. See, so it's not that bad. It does bend, but it doesn't break. I thought maybe this was gonna be so overcooked it would snap. You know, you get that sometimes with the flats, but this is pretty good. And then that point obviously is gonna be super tender. Take a look at that nice piece of point right there. This is obviously my favorite part. And then This is that, so yeah, see how you bend this, it kind of breaks apart. And you can see how black it is on the bottom there. This was that piece that got hit with that flare up. Definitely burnt it a little bit. And this just falls apart. But I'm gonna go ahead and give this a shot first, because I would think this is the worst part. Very dry there, obviously. Almost on the verge of a beef jerky that's been soaked in fat for a little bit. But this part up here is perfect. And this is still good. Still a good piece. Just a little chewy, yeah, where it got hit with that flare up. But for the end piece, if it didn't get hit with that flare up, I think it'd be really good. But sadly, we had a flare up on the Masterbuilt, which isn't something new for me. But let me give one of these better pieces a try. Give the point a try, my favorite piece. Here we go. That's delicious. I want to try this piece of flat with some of the fat on there. So good, that fat. Perfectly rendered, delicious brisket on the Masterbuilt. Definitely better than on a pellet cooker. Whenever I do brisket, I know I'm going to be using my offset because that's really the only way to cook good brisket, in my opinion. I mean, it's okay on a pellet cooker. It just doesn't turn out as well as an offset. So if I'm going to take the time and the effort, spend the money on a brisket, I'm going to cook it on my offset smoker because you get such great flavor. Still, I think the offset does add more smoky flavor. With an offset, it's a different kind of smoky flavor because you're cooking with just fire. Whereas even with these logs, they're kind of just smoldering. So it's a totally different flavor profile when you're actually burning the logs. They're getting clean fire and it's moving through and cooking it. But that being said, this is a delicious brisket, and how much easier it is to run the Masterbuilt. Biggest downfall is those flare-ups, but you got to keep an eye when you're bumping temperature up. But I would highly suggest doing one of these if you have a Masterbuilt, especially if you can keep it up off those grates. If I want to do an easy brisket, I don't feel like running the offset all day, because with an offset, obviously you're out there every 20 minutes or so feeding the fire, really keeping things in check, whereas this, it's kind of set it and forget it. Besides flare-ups, you don't want to lose track of that. But that being said, between this and the offset, I will use both of these now to cook brisket. If I'm looking to go all out, get the best brisket I can, it's going on the offset. But this isn't a bad brisket at all. This is a very, very good brisket. So the Masterbuilt did a fantastic job. Again, minus the flare-ups, but highly suggest that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a like. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe right over here. And I'll leave a couple of videos over here. I'll leave the RFX meat thermometer review over here along with another good barbecue video. But most importantly, get out there and smoke something good.